Hidden far north in the US is a one-of-a-kind service that is largely extinct. Just steps away from downtown Boston exists a travel portal, one that brings you back to old rolling stock, but also brings you back to an old style of railway travel that nearly doesn't exist in the US or in the world anymore. Come with me to Boston to see how Americans vacationed back in the 1950s and how many Bostoners still do today. Good morning from Boston's West End, just outside of North Station. North Station is one of the two primary Bostonian railway terminals. From here, one can get on one of the 5 commuter lines and the one and only Amtrak Downeaster. Just above North Station is Boston's TD Garden, where one can catch live Bruins and Celtics games and beautiful concerts. Additionally, there are hotels serving this block, a grocery store, a Starbucks, and even more inside, where one can find possibly the 2 closest Dunkin' locations and many other establishments. This right here is Hub Hall, a relatively new development from 2021 that is nestled into the station and congregated heavily prior to games at TD Garden or the adjacent Big Night Live, which hosts some concerts and events. It features a huge sections of restaurants, including Meg's Pastry, a local favorite amongst Bostonians. I personally enjoy Cafe Nero, but other than that, I prefer to go to North End restaurants, located just across the street from here, rather than the restaurants here, as many of the restaurants here have a high price to pay for rent and capitalize on the stimulated captive market, when in reality the North End just by here has many beautiful spots such as Filippo and Ducaldi right next to it. Inside of the station proper, there's one Dunkin' inside of the gates and one outside. There's also a McDonald's, a small pizza place, a small sit-down place, a convenience store, and there are also ticket machines and booths. By booths, there are bathrooms, although these are pretty disgusting, so I suggest you to use the ones in Hub Hall instead. Note that those will have a code, although most workers will give the code to you for free. There are also direct connections to TD Garden and the MBTA orange and green lines. Out front, the MBTA 4 bus picks up, which does provide a direct connection to South Station, albeit only 4 times a day or so. Well, now that we've passed through the gates, let's get to our train. Our train today is Amtrak train number 693, the 11:50 Downeaster service to Brunswick. We can board easily on track 9. Business class always boards at the car closest to the platforms of North Station, and today we have business class. Those of coach class will board slightly further down. Once inside, we can find our seat and get set up. Soon later, we will depart on our way north to Maine. Once again, we are on train 693, the Downeaster service to Brunswick. We'll make a pickup-only stop at Anderson-Woburn before crossing over the Wildcat branch and going onto the Haverhill line, which will stop at Haverhill, the final MBTA stop before leaving the MBTA network. It is not at all long until we cross over to New Hampshire, with only 3 stops in the state. Exeter and Dover as small, cutesy New England towns, as well as the college town of Durham in between the both of them. Not too long later, we are in Maine, where Wells and Saco serve mostly the locals. Old Orchard Beach is a seasonal stop with loads of history, and Portland is a beautiful mid-sized city. After Portland, the train backs up and goes forward again to Freeport, home to L.L. Bean, and finishes at the college town of Brunswick, home to Bowdoin College, and yes, I can finally pronounce it correctly, and a gateway to some of the most beautiful coastlines on the East Coast. All in all, our journey today to Portland is scheduled to take 2 hours and 30 minutes, and the full journey on any given day to Brunswick is scheduled to take 3 hours and 20 minutes. Now that we are already dashing down the low line's shared corridor with the green line, it is best we explore our train earlier to give the more historic parts of it that come later their deserved and undergiven spotlight. Business class on the Downeaster comes with a typical 1x2 layout, with it being strongly preferred that passengers sit on the side with only one seat if they are alone. Seats recline very far, and by my estimation, give about 10 inches of legroom, although unfortunately I lacked the foresight to bring aboard a tape measure. The seats, unfortunately, however, are a bit hard, but nothing too bad. Business class seating includes 2 outlets per side of the row, and also a blind to keep light from the window out from you. Additionally, overhead bins are provided for storage, as well as some bins in other areas, including in the historic baggage car. Finally, business class passengers are offered one complimentary non-alcoholic beverage from the cafe car, typically presented upon their arrival in the train. However, they can be redeemed at any time in the cafe car with presentation of your business class ticket until you leave the train. Overall, this is a very typical business class for a state-sponsored route, made even more typical by the fact that it's in the back of the cafe car rather than its own car itself. Overall, the vast majority of passengers will not be in business, and so because of that, we will be exploring the rest of the train, but not so fast as we are just now arriving into Anderson, Woburn. Woburn is a suburb of Massachusetts that hosts a park and ride. Other than that, this station is not so interesting, but Woburn does have one of the best places to get pizza in all of Massachusetts. If only it was not in a place so hard to get to without walking. Anyways, back to our train, and right out of business class, we come into the cafe car. The cafe car is unique within Amtrak's network and is entirely different from the offering that you will see on the Northeast Regional and other state-sponsored routes, such as the Pennsylvanian, and this is because it is managed by the Northern New England Passenger Rail Authority. If you're used to having Coke on Amtrak routes, you'll be in for a surprise, as Pepsi is what is offered here. Additionally, it results in some more local brands being available. Finally, there's also Charlie cards able to be purchased here, which can be used on arrival in Boston if you would like to use them. I believe you can also directly add value to your Charlie card here. However, I did not try that, so if I'm wrong, please do comment. There is also a small dining area in the other half of the cafe car that is available for you to sit and mingle with other passengers. However, keep in mind that this area is typically restricted to cafe car patrons only and is not able to be used by yourself if you have not bought something from the cafe car. Moving past, we move into the coach class seating. Now, the coach class seating here is typically made up of 3 to 5 Amfleet 2 cars and 1 Amtrak Horizon car. All of them feature Amfleet 2 seats with a 2x2 layout. The Horizon cars are a relatively new introduction, with 2 having been repaired very recently for use on the Downeaster specifically. More are planned to be repaired, and all in all, Amtrak plans to repair a total of 16 of them. These are mostly one-directional, but there are areas on the ends which are bi-directional for seating for groups of 3 or more, and a few dedicated areas for wheelchair users to sit. Each seat is very plush and very comfortable to sit in and huge. I just know that much of us would love to have this type of seat at home, and as much flack as the US gets for having a poor train network that I do agree with, you have to admit that these seats are some of the best, if not the best, economy class seats on the market globally right now. The seats themselves feature a tray table, a net for storage, and 2 charging sockets. They also do feature access to overhead bins and bins at the end of the car. However, they do lack the blind that is featured on the business class seating. But now it is time to head back to our seat as we prepare for arrival into Haverhill.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are now arriving at our next station stop, Haverhill.
Haverhill is a small town north of Boston which rose to prominence in the late 19th and early 20th century for its production of shoes. It also became known as the first U.S. city to have elected a socialist for its mayor, and for having an early site of urban renewal, something that was very controversial locally. Haverhill is also known to be the final stop of the aptly named Haverhill line of the MBTA commuter rail, and it is at this point that we leave the MBTA network to start on Amtrak-only territory. Shortly, we pass into the state of New Hampshire. In New Hampshire, there are only 4 total passenger rail stations in the entire state, all of which serve Amtrak, and 3 of those 4 are on this line. The first of these is Exeter, home to Phillips Exeter Academy, one of the most elite and selective high schools in the United States, with alumni such as Mark Zuckerberg and Ned Lamont. Exeter is also just next to the popular beach town of Hampton, a favorite of Bostoners for a weekend summer getaway, and something that you will see become a theme for this line, weekend summer getaways. But now we are already moving on to Durham UNH. Durham is also a school town, be it this time a college town. The University of New Hampshire is located here and is an amazing public university for those of New Hampshire. The positioning here makes the Downeaster an amazing option for the students of UNH, as it allows them to access Boston without a car for concerts, dates, and away days with UNH's hockey team. It also allows them to easily access beautiful towns up north, which we'll come to soon, such as Dover. Dover is a small, charming New England town, one that I have lots of memories of coming to as a kid, specifically for the Children's Museum here. The stop also serves as the stop for Kittery, Maine and Portsmouth, New Hampshire, both of which are slightly bigger, charming New England towns. Moving by, we are soon in Maine, which is what this train is really centered around. Maine is huge, and this train covers a lot of its coastal areas. Wells, Maine is one of the many New England vacation towns, although much more onto the coast than it is on this part of the city where the station is. But that segues me directly into talking about the history of this train as a vacation service and their train in general. The US has a rich rail history which many of us know all too well is now just bones of its former self. Part of this rich rail history is vacation trains. These trains would take corporate workers and their families from large northern cities such as New York and Chicago down south to beautiful destinations for vacations, often over the course of 1 to 3 days. Vacation trains in New York and New England were often very unique, always, in the way that they would typically be the sort of trains that would have much shorter distances due to the fact that the beaches themselves are basically right there, comparatively to cities like Chicago, which, while having a beach, is not one that is more of a vacation destination, rather more of a local one. Other trains like the Downeaster that are still in operation include the Cape Flyer and the Long Island Railroad Montauk Line, and both of these deserve their own videos. But this brings the question of what exactly the history of trains like this, shorter vacation trains that can also function as commuter lines, is. It is a question that took me a lot of wondering during the research of this video. Not many trains exist that are similar outside of the US and Canada in the modern day. We do have one newer one in Brightline, but looking into history, it is clear that for the most part, these continue to be a Northeastern anomaly. Outside of the US, these exist in various forms, but very sparsely. Let's explore them later on, but for now, we are arriving into Saco. Saco is a small town. The station is located on a tiny island with it, and this island has an abandoned factory that is also now home to many local shops and restaurants. In Saco is also Funtown Splashtown, a classic amusement park loved by Mainers and many people who are from New Hampshire and northern Massachusetts. It is an absolute gem. There are also some beaches here, although we'll be seeing much more of those later on. For now, let's explore some of those international shorter vacation trains. In Mexico, Tren Maya is one of the newer trains of the century, but is incredibly controversial. While it is in the same vein of the Downeaster, it is incredibly problematic due to the fact that much of the tracks were built directly on displacement of indigenous lands and communities in Mexico. The train runs from Chiapas at Palenque until Quintana Roo at Cancun, running through large cities such as San Francisco de Campeche and Mérida, as well as smaller touristy places such as Chichen Itza, Playa del Carmen, and Cancun. Over in Europe, there are also many trains that run a shorter distance that can take you for vacation. But the thing is, in Europe, as trains had a very different development, most of these trains just come simply as normal high-speed lines, ones that you can take from Paris to the south of France or Madrid to coastal Spain. But now, we are getting to a station and one of the more interesting ones. This is Old Orchard Beach, our penultimate stop today, and it is only open between May and October. It is one of the premier beach towns in New England, seeing a mass rush of tourists in the summer, mostly coming from within New England or coming from Quebec. In fact, some of the signs here are in French due to the amount of Quebecois who like to vacation down here in the summer. This video was filmed on July 4th, one of the most popular days for tourists at this beach, with hundreds packing the tiny town to watch the fireworks and enjoy the small amusement park and boardwalk and relax. Moving on, we are very shortly into Portland, our final destination. After Portland, this train will continue on to Freeport, home to LL Bean, and terminate at Brunswick, a small town home to Bowdoin College. And yes, I have finally learned how to pronounce it correctly. As we dash through this beautiful scenery of this marsh, let's talk about pricing and value. My ticket was purchased about 2 weeks before this journey for a business class seat on the 11:50 departure, and I got it for $44 US. I would say that is a pretty good value for the fact that I booked so close to the ride. And in fact, as of the day of script writing, a 2 months in advance ticket on the exact same train would also be $44 US. Overall, I would recommend this train to you if you want to explore Maine and you are from the Boston area, or if you're in the Boston area for a while and have time for a day trip to Maine, especially in the summer. The train is overall of a pretty good value and the tickets are pretty fairly priced. Just be careful to book in advance and also make sure that you research the area you are going into before, as many of these areas can get extremely packed in the summer, so it is important to have your hotel reservation ready long before. But now we are arriving into Portland, and we are able to just leave and walk into the station. The station here is actually pretty interesting, as originally it was this station, which is now just an office building. Therefore, the bus terminal and this train stop are combined. Because of this, the train stop is actually on a spur, meaning it must go backwards before it can go forwards. The inside is mostly bare bones here, with just some vending machines and a set of bathrooms, a ticket booth, screens for departure, and some departure doors themselves. If you want to see a video of a train of a similar vein that is also in New England, click here now to watch my video on the Cape Flyer. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you soon!